Inside of the church and religion, narcissism runs rampant so many times simply because of the uplifting and the pushing up of there being one person in the church that is the best, or that is the most, as far as like, oh, he's the most spiritual. He's the one that is this. And you see this time and time again based on pastors. And the reason why I bring it up in this direction of like pastors is because pastors are also the ones that get lifted up so high and also crucified so easily, simply because they're human. But oftentimes we'll elevate them to a place where they aren't human, where they are just this amazing person that can do no wrong. And then until they finally do the biggest wrong, then, oh, well, now they're an awful person. Typically, this is where you see pastors that are completely just obliterated from their ministries because of decisions that they made, openings that they put into their life that allowed cheating to come in, that allowed lying to come in, that allowed manipulation to come in, that all of a sudden was okay for a period of time until people found out, and then poof, you're the worst thing ever. Now, inside of this place, it puts oftentimes pastors at a place where they have to keep an image, right? Because other people are expecting this. I'm not playing the line of like, oh, he's a victim and he has to do this. I'm just saying this is oftentimes reality. Because the church expects the pastor to be perfect. A lot of churches do. They're like, oh, no, that's not my church. Okay, well, welcome to majority of Christianity that's fake. A lot of churches want the pastor to be perfect. They want it to be fun. They want it to be happy. They want it to be good. They don't want to deal with the dark shit that's actually happening in the pastor's life, in his own life, in the parishioner's life, whoever. You see this when you go to churches and you see the happy piece of church, but you don't see the shitty piece of church. And that's because the majority of people are running away from it. They're running away from bringing their darkness in and saying, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. Instead, it's like, hey, let's have a great day and let's smile and be fake at the same time. This happens all the time. Parents coming into church where they're screaming at their kids, screaming at their wife, like arguments, issues, big fights, that then walk in, they're like, yeah, we're great. Putting on a mask. The majority of Christianity and a lot of religions also just put on masks when they show up to church, to religious organizations, and it is one of the most infused, besides maybe politics, one of the most infused mask-wearing organizations out there. Simply because people don't want to show their shit. They don't want to say, hey, something's wrong. Like, I'm struggling in this. Like, the marriage is falling apart. Early on inside of our marriage, where I cheated, where there was this disconnection, where there's these arguments, where these fights, the first year of our marriage was hell. Like, both Kayla and I will both attest to that. And it was before any cheating happened. Simply because we didn't understand how to operate. We didn't understand how to communicate. We didn't understand how to get along. And there was also the abusive asshole of me that was narcissistic coming into the relationship that I didn't know was going on. So I just kept doing what I was going to do. Making sure I win arguments at all costs. Making sure I was the one in charge. All this kind of stupid stuff. But inside of that, I didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to communicate. There was no connection there. There was just frustration. And marriage, at that point, we were like, this is awful. Like, why would anyone want to get married if this is what the reality is? Like, this is awful. Now, the wild thing about this is inside of Christianity and religion and the churches we were involved in, we didn't want to show that shit to everybody else. We didn't want to show that we were struggling. Simply because everyone else around us, quote unquote, wasn't struggling. We didn't see it. There's nothing to identify. We're like, well, they have a great marriage. They have a great marriage. They have a great marriage. It just must be us. It must be an issue that we have. We just have a communication problem. We just need to figure this out. We just need to pray more and we'll magically get better. But in reality, what was happening is there wasn't other people that just had amazing marriages. There was other people that had really awful marriages, but they weren't willing to share it, just like we weren't. This is another piece that keeps people in toxic relationships way too long when they're inside certain religious organizations. Simply because it's frowned upon to get divorced. And as a result, he continues to beat his wife. But don't get divorced. It's frowned upon to separate. But it still lets him emotionally and mentally abuse. It's frowned upon to move away or to like get an order of protection. But he continues to abuse sexually or emotionally. Like, this happens inside the Christian world where a lot of people will make sure you stay stuck in the relationship because it's not quote unquote biblical to leave. But in reality, when you're dealing with this, when you're struggling with a toxic relationship, the thing is, you need to understand there's more people out there that are dealing with the same exact thing. Church doesn't share that with you. They don't show that. They oftentimes show a mask. So you see inside of religion, you see pastors that have masks, some because the congregation wants them to have a mask, some because the pastor then has to put up a mask because he doesn't want to reveal who he actually is. You see the people that come to church that all bring their own masks saying, hey, I don't want to actually deal with the fact that, our marriage is failing, that I was looking at pornography, that I'm struggling in this, all of these things that people come to the church service with. And it's wild because some people are like, oh, well, this is why the church is struggling. This is why the church is not having a revival. Yeah, no shit, because there's not people that are actually following God underneath the surface, just on the surface, just enough to be able to pass the litmus test of smile and have a good day, but it's a mask. You don't have to be a narcissist to have a mask, okay? Mask, oftentimes we equate with narcissism, mask, right? But you don't have to be a narcissist to have a mask. You can just be human. And you simply being human and not wanting to actually share your vulnerable truth with the world puts up a mask. Everybody lies. Everybody lies. You end up lying about what you're telling other people simply when you don't tell the full and honest truth, when you don't show up vulnerable. When you don't show up vulnerable to yourself, then you can't show up vulnerable to other people. The simple fact that you might be struggling inside the healing aspect because you're not willing to be vulnerable and honest with yourself about the situation. Instead, you keep avoiding it, running away from it, being like, it's okay, it's not that big of a deal, it's just him, he's just struggling, it'll get better, he'll finally figure it out, and you're not actually looking at the facts. And when you don't look at the facts, you ignore truth, you ignore reality, and you continue to move forward thinking this will get better when reality nothing has. You develop your own version of truth. You start to lie. You develop your own mask that makes you look and feel and seem better to the world when in reality you're dying inside. You're dying because of how he's treating you on a day-to-day basis, how he's making you feel. The emotion, the mental manipulation that's confusing you, that's frustrating you, that's leaving you distraught and wondering, what am I even going to do? How am I even going to process this? How am I even going to focus at work? How am I even going to go in? How am I going to even show up? All these things that put you into a place of chaos and confusion simply because of your avoidance of truth. You see, everybody lies. And when I say that, I don't mean that everybody's showing up intentionally being a liar, being like, I'm going to lie today about that. No, I'm saying a lot of people do not do the work to get underneath. Like underneath the surface of what's actually going on. The emotions, the feelings, the things, the stories that you're telling yourself. This is part of my journey, is getting underneath this, seeing what is underneath. How do I figure out what's the story that I'm telling myself? Something that is lower and deeper and darker that I haven't dealt with yet, that I need to in order to grow, to move to the next level. Next level of who I am. Who I am inside of how I show up mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, relationship-wise, business-wise, everything. Because this whole life that we're living is about expansion, growth, and development. This is why God has actually placed you on the earth, to expand, to grow, to develop. He even says in Genesis to have dominion over the earth. This isn't a manipulation or a lordship over. This is a piece of saying, hey, he said expand, grow, develop, become amazing. But oftentimes we relegate that and we slow it down and we limit ourselves based on the story we're telling ourselves, based on the lie that you're believing. The lie that you're believing that you've manufactured to stay in the relationship. The lie that you're believing because he projected it onto you so much you finally started to think that it's true. When in reality it's just him pushing his agenda, pushing his thought process onto you, and it's not actually true at all. When we talk about this piece of masks, you're going to see masks so many times inside of Christianity, inside of different religions. And one of the things growing up inside of deep Christianity, like Southern Baptist conventions, like being in this whole piece of Christianity. The big thing that was not preached and not told, but was exemplified, was conformity over connection. You had to conform to the image of what needed to happen versus have a connection with God. You had to show up looking a certain way, acting a certain way, being a certain way, remember who you are versus who you are in connection with God. I see this all the time inside of churches, inside of religion, where people are more concerned about being conforming to a certain image than they are having a divine connection with God. Masks are everywhere. It's not just with narcissists. It's not just with narcissism. Masks are prevalent everywhere. Politics, massive. But you also have religion, massive. Because the mask that a person puts on is to be able to keep other people from seeing the vulnerable, real, raw truth underneath you. And that's one of the most precious things you could actually give to the world. Your real truth. Like what's actually underneath, your raw feelings. Being able to say, this is what's going on. But when you hide that, you limit other people from healing. You limit yourself from exposing and growing and developing you. You limit the healing process from even being able to happen. Simply because the mask that you're under, the mask that you're using is keeping you stuck. If you feel stuck inside the relationship, outside the relationship, or you're trying to figure out how do you heal, I want you to reach out for help. Go to rawmotivations.com today to learn more.